Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another installment in our weekly recap series. So I actually missed last week. Unfortunately, just work was insane. So I ended up being just bogged down with deadlines, and I just wasn't able to do the video. So this week is going to be a little bit of a catch up, and as you can tell, we're changing up the format a little bit. I just figured it would be better to have a video component instead of just going through pictures. But let me know your thoughts on this. If anything, I can always revert back to that older one. This is just fun, right? And I just figured there's certain topics I wanted to touch base on. And this is a pretty packed week. There are some news stories, there are some releases that I think are worth discussing. And there are some figures that were announced last week that, while I think a lot of people have already touched base on, I wanted to throw in my 2 cents and at least provide my thoughts on those as well. So hopefully you'll hang in there with me. But before we do that, I do have to go into my mandatory disclaimer. And, someday I'll explain why I do that. It's not really associated with any of the current drama going on in the community, but it's more just I had something happen that I figured I'd put that in there before every video. So before moving on, we'll go through that. So I'm not affiliated with any of these companies in the video that we're discussing. I'm not affiliated with any resellers either, and I'm not using this as a sales post, which is why I don't post links for purchasing these. The purpose of these videos is just for me to discuss interesting news posted essentially on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Weibo, that impacts six-scale figure collecting, and in particular, figures I find interesting or topics I find interesting, or products that I'm tempted to get for my own collection. And I do think once pictures go public for announcement, it's pretty much up for discussion. So with that out of the way, let's get into things. Start with news updates. And there really is one news story here that I kind of wanted to touch on. And that was SooSoo Toys. Now, I've gotten a bunch of SooSoo releases. You can actually see my Matt Murdock in the back. I think they're a great company. They're probably one of my favorite third-party companies. I think they're a step towards getting to that licensed figure level that Hot Toys has. Not quite there, but they're closing it. And one of the things that scared me, at least as a collector that does like them, is they did go radio silent. They've released a couple of figures, but after Homelander and after they released the final images of Homelander, and there was a lot of backlash, I think understandably, of all the third-party Homelanders, theirs was kind of surprisingly one of the weakest sculpts, at least I thought. They kind of went radio silent, and there were some rumors starting to float around about them potentially not being around or having some kind of financial issues. They went on Facebook, they went on social media and posted, and they did post a teaser image, which we'll go on after. We'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. But they basically said they're still working, they're still cranking out figures. They won't be putting up any more pre-orders until they resolve whatever issues plaguing Homelander, and hopefully that means that they'll be fixing that figure. I did not order that. I was tempted to get into the boys line, but I've got way too much on my plate. But again, I do have other figures that they've done. They've pretty much tackled a lot of the Daredevil line. They're giving us Mr. Knight from Moon Knight. So there are a lot of interesting figures there worth picking up that I do have on order, right? So it's nice to know that they're still around and they're at least addressing some of the concerns. We'll have to wait and see how it kind of develops. But for now, I think it's good news. And they are teasing their own version of Deathstroke from the Justice League. I think it's from the theatrical cut. That final scene on the yacht with Deathstroke. So figure looks pretty incredible. I mean, I think if you look at the image, it actually it looks pretty impressive. Will SooSoo Toys be able to even deliver that? I am taking a little bit of a wait and see attitude. I have, again, a couple of their figures on pre-order, maybe one or two at this point in time, and this one, depending on what I have on my plate at that time and what my budget allows, might be something that I'd add to the list. It looks pretty impressive. I think the sculpt, you can't quite see it. These are, it's just one shot that they're giving us, but I think there's a lot of promise there, and it's a good tease. But I think the key thing for SooSoo is they've got a lot of figures that they've had on pre-order for some time. I mean, Homelander's been on pre-order for 2 years at this point in time. And then you've got a lot of Teen Titans figures that they've had on pre-order for a while as well that haven't seen the light of day. So I think they have to catch up. They have some Watchmen figures as well. They've got a good catalog, and they just need to get those figures out. I'm hoping that in a rush to get those done, that the quality doesn't suffer. I feel like the Rogue figure that I reviewed, there were definitely some QA/QC issues that I don't know if it's attributed to them rushing these releases out, but it's something I'd watch out for. And hopefully we don't see that start to become a common theme with them as they release. So there is an update, and now I think it's kind of a wait and see to see what actually happens with them. So that'll be interesting. Now, moving on to announcements, and this is where we're going to move back a little bit. And look, when I go over these figures, like I tell you usually in the beginning, I'm going over them because they're interesting for either to discuss the company, to discuss what those 6-scale companies are doing. Figures look good. I'm tempted to get it, or I'm definitely going to get them. But they're usually figures that I think are worth discussing, and there's a lot of backstory there. So for me, I wanted to touch base on that One Piece series a little bit. Now, I know nothing of One Piece. I know the show's been getting like a pretty popular and pretty positive response from everything I've seen. So it is on my queue to watch. There's just so much I need to catch up on at this point. I still have 2 episodes of Ahsoka to catch up on. Netflix, I have just so much on the queue. This one might move to the front based on just popular response. So if you've watched it and it's worth seeing, let me know. Again, I just have a lot to catch up on that I'm still working my way through. But I do think it's interesting that Hot Toys decided to tackle this license. And look, my wife had some family over that, and even before I knew that there was going to be a live action show, this was a few months ago, they were raving and going on about One Piece, and I'm just not familiar at all with that property. I'm pretty much a movie, TV, and in my younger years, it was a lot of comic book reading, so that was kind of my forte. But they seemed very excited, and they seem to indicate that this was a great story. So I'm curious to see what's going on. But there are 2 figures coming out. It's Monkey D. Luffy. Hopefully I'm getting that right. And Rorona Zoro. Now, with the Luffy figure, the likeness, the sculpt, it's that Hot Toys level of quality that we're anticipating, right? We're used to seeing. And one thing I'll say about Hot Toys, and it'll kind of come up as we talk about some of the releases, even their weakest figure, and even a figure that maybe misses on the likeness, like the Thena that I reviewed, the sculpts are still pretty solid. And it's still an overall decent figure that I would even rate higher than some great third-party figures. So I don't think I've ever gotten a Hot Toys figure that I've been completely, completely unsatisfied with, or that I completely hated off the bat. I think there are some figures that you're kind of disappointed in a little bit, but never one that I'm like, it's trash, it's going to go in the garbage, the whole thing stinks, right? Like I said, that Thena figure, again, for example, even though the likeness to Angelina Jolie wasn't there, it was still a really solid figure overall. So with these, I think the likeness for the actors, they're pretty good. I think the Luffy figure actually has a really great likeness. Now, as far as the figure itself, I would have to watch the movie, the show. Sorry, just looking at the figure, it's decent. It's a great release. I love the effect pieces that it has. Feels a lot like Mr. Fantastic with the elongated arms and the elongated leg. I'm sure once I watch the show, I'll understand why that's happening. But it's just not in my immediate wheelhouse. It's not in my immediate radar that it's something I have to pre-order. That might change again once I watch the show. If I really like it, it might be something I'm interested in getting. But for now, it's a good looking figure, and I do think the Zoro is probably the better of the 2, or the one that at least seems more visually attractive of the 2. I think just the swords, he looks pretty impressive. The triple sword setup figure looks like it's highly posable. The likeness is pretty good. It's a nice figure overall. So I think Hot Toys is doing a good job, at least launching into this world of One Piece. And I think more importantly, they're diversifying. I think we know Star Wars is slowing down. We know Marvel is slowing down. You've got a huge strike right now, and who knows when that's going to end. So look, my wallet appreciates it because I'm still very much into collecting Marvel. So getting a little bit of a break from that is something I'd appreciate. And then I think it's also giving Hot Toys some opportunities to fill in those gaps with some figures that maybe we might not normally see, although One Piece seems to be very popular, so they might have tackled that license regardless. But just a few thoughts. I think overall the two figures look great. Not something I'm in immediate rush to pick up, and I don't even know if I'll actually be getting them. But I think just like most Hot Toys pieces, they're pretty good. They look pretty solid. So, again, good if you're interested in them. I think the likeness is pretty much there on point. Now, the next figure that I want to talk about is actually a third party from Thunder Toys, and it's their God of the Moon, aka Konshu. Now, full disclosure, I've already pre-ordered this one. There's no way I was passing on it. There have been, I think there might have been one other version that was essentially just the Mr. Knight figure with a swappable Konshu sculpt. So the size, it was pretty much the same standard 6 scale 12-inch size. Now this one is actually coming in at about 19.5 to 20 inches, so it's a pretty tall figure. And if you watch the show, it makes sense, right? Konshu towers over Moon Knight and over everybody else. I think Thunder Toys, at least the prototype, they absolutely nailed it. I think the sculpt looks great, and a lot of these companies, when you're dealing with non-human sculpts, and when you don't have to worry about getting the likeness to an actor right, I think they do a phenomenal job capturing it. So here, it looks like they did just that. The rest of the figure looks great, right? The clothing set, the bandages, the mummy look, everything there is pretty good. And I like the effect that they're using kind of a clear peg for the skull to replicate that kind of freestanding floating head that we saw in the TV show. So I think it's an overall pretty impressive release. Now, the only Thunder Toys figure I have was the Valkyrie that they did from, based on the hairstyle, I think it was from Ragnarok. That figure was decent. I think the sculpt wasn't 100% there, and it was very basic, but the body was good, the clothing set, the accessories, it was pretty decent, I'll say. So with third party, I think you just have to go in knowing that you're not going to get necessarily a Hot Toys level product. You're not going to get an Inart product, level product. You know, they've got 2 releases in, or 1.5, so to speak, but you're not going to get something of that quality necessarily, but you could potentially get something decent, or they could go the other way and it could be totally bad. So I'm getting the figure because it fills that void. A third party does a great job filling those voids for me in my collection. As a Marvel collector, as a heavy Marvel collector, there's no way I was going to pass on Konshu. So I just think it's overall a good release. It looks like it'll be a good release, and now it's just fingers crossed the final product turns out as good as the prototype. Now, the next figure, we're going to delve a little bit into Star Wars again, also from last week, was the Praetorian Guard from The Mandalorian Season 3, from that those final 2 episodes in the season. Like a lot of you, I was not a huge fan of The Mandalorian, of the 3rd season. I thought the first 2 seasons were pretty decent. I don't think I was as crazy about it as a lot of Star Wars fans were, which is probably why I haven't picked up a figure from the series. My Star Wars collecting is just starting to come back, and I'm starting to focus more on the lightsaber figures. So more on Jedi, more on Sith, Obi-Wan, Kenobi, the miniseries. Again, not super well received, or it seemed like there was a lot of criticism, but there were a lot of great characters there. The Grand Inquisitor, Reva, Obi-Wan, Darth Vader. I have all those on order, so it's definitely starting to kind of guide where my collection is going. And then Ahsoka now, with more lightsaber figures, I think that could be a potential problem for me, because I think there are going to be a lot of figures there that I'm going to want to pick up. Having said that, the Praetorian Guard looks pretty cool. I think the red look and that evolution from the Royal Guard we saw in the original Return of the Jedi down to the guards that we saw in I think it was The Last Jedi. It's a nice evolution to what we're ending up seeing in The Mandalorian. I think the weapons look great. I think the figure overall is going to stand out. It's definitely an army builder of sorts. For me, it's going to be a pass. It doesn't mean that the figure doesn't look great. It still looks pretty stunning. But again, my collection is starting to veer into another direction. But there's just no denying that these Star Wars figures look pretty fantastic and pretty impressive overall. So again, Praetorian Guard, really solid release. If you've seen any of my other kind of first thoughts videos, you know my stance on troops or troopers or clone troopers, stormtroopers. They're beautiful figures. There's no denying that whatsoever. I can't army build. I have way too much on my plate right now. So that's again why I'm veering towards those Sith and Jedi characters, because they all have a much more unique look. And it's also why I'm staying away from the Mandalorian figures in those releases, because again, even though figures like Bo-Katan are pretty appealing, or Casca Reeves and Mando himself, it starts looking very similar to me. Whereas, you know, the Jedi figures, you're getting very different characters. At least that's kind of my perception. So again, Praetorian Guard looks pretty stunning. And if you do want an army build, I think with all the variety of weapons it comes with, it's going to be a pretty nice army builder there behind, especially if you want to put him behind Moff Gideon, the new version that's coming out, or taking on, you know, the heavy Mando. So there are a lot of opportunities there for good display options. And now sticking with Star Wars, one of the interesting announcements from this week was actually a third-party Yoda. And the reason I say it's interesting is just that you never really see third-party tackle Star Wars. There's been a third-party, I think Mace Windu, third-party Anakin Skywalker with terrible hair. So there have been those figures, but for some reason the third-party companies just veer away from it. I don't know if there's not that much interest outside of the US or Europe, but there's definitely something there. Now, he does come in two versions, a standard, which just includes his cane, a lightsaber, which also has a blade effect, and swappable hands and feet. The figure looks pretty good. It's Yoda. The sculpt work on the head looks pretty impressive, and I think he does have a little bit of hair that isn't sculpted. It's actually rooted hair, which for the amount he has makes sense. It's not much, basically. And then he's got the deluxe, which is a little bit more impressive of a set, including that council seat of his where he's kind of meditating, and some backdrop pieces so you can create a diorama. And he does have that alternate sculpt with his eyes closed to kind of really have that that scene, or recreate that scene where he's contemplating or listening to kind of Anakin have his fall. So I think it's a decent release. I mean, there's no denying that. I think this company has actually only done one other release at this point, which was a third-party 1/12th scale Vulture. So I think this would be their first venture into the 6 scale market. So not sure what to expect. I think the warning remains there with third party is you never know what you're going to get. You're either going to get something pretty impressive. And I think that's where a company like SooSoo, like we were discussing, you're starting to get an idea of what they can do and what to expect, which is also why their Homelander was so shocking to me, that the sculpt wasn't that great. And then, of course, you also have companies like Toys Era and all their subsidiaries, right? They were kind of a mixed bag. And recently, they've been getting much better. I don't know if they hired a new sculptor or something, but you're getting much more consistency in the sculpts. This company, I don't know anything about them, so even though the prototype looks good, there's no guarantee that the final production piece is going to look like it. So I think it's interesting that there's somebody's venturing in here. Now, for me, I have a Sideshow Yoda that has kind of the same setup with the seat, the council seat. I'm satisfied with that one for now. And if Hot Toys ever decides to make another Yoda, I think I can wait for that. I don't usually give you advice. I kind of just want to give you my thoughts on some of these figures. But if you wait, I'm almost 100% sure Hot Toys is going to do another Yoda. I mean, at this point, why wouldn't they, right? So there's this third party here. It's not that too expensive, but for me, I think what you'd get with a Hot Toys Yoda might be better. You probably get some light up USB features. So it's just something to keep in mind. But there is an option, and somehow third party seems to be jumping into the Star Wars fray a little bit. Now, the last announcement that I wanted to go over before we go into releases is another surprising one, which is Ashley, the President's daughter from Resident Evil 4. And it's now the second or third version of the character that we're getting from third parties. It's pretty much the same exact thing that happened with the Ada Wong from the remake, where we've gotten 2 full figures at this point, and we've gotten kind of a costume, a clothing set with a sculpt. So third party's going all in this line, which I'm fine with, right? I want to pick up an Ada and I want to pick up an Ashley. Our Resident Evil 4 was one of the first Resident Evils I actually played on the GameCube. So again, dating myself. But it was such a great game, and even without having gotten an opportunity to play the remake, it's nice to get some of those characters. Now, the only one that's missing is Leon, right, in that RE4 look. So hopefully that this is a sign that at some point we'll be getting that figure. But what you're getting here with Ashley looks pretty impressive. She comes with the rolling eye system, which I think it's pretty interesting that third party's starting to get in on that. So it's no longer just an Inart or a Hot Toys thing. It's pretty much starting to become more widespread. And the figure actually does come with an alternate sculpt that kind of shows an infected portrait. So for a simple base figure, which is just a person in civilian clothing, with some interesting accessories, right? She comes with a gun, she comes with a lamp, she comes with a barrel so you can sit her on. I'm a sucker for those kind of small diorama pieces. So I think it's an impressive package overall. And it's a character that I don't know that anybody, even somebody with a license, would tackle. So it's just an opportunity to get a good looking figure. Now, what's interesting here is there is a second version that they're also releasing, which is Ashley in armor from an Armor Hall. I don't remember the game it was a long time ago that I played it. I don't know if she ends up hiding in armor or this might be an alternate look from the game or from the remake. I think it's interesting. I think the armor looks pretty good. I think it's detailed well. I think it's functioning, right? The visor opens. It's pretty impressive. I just, for my Resident Evil collection, which is basically a bunch of, that RE5 collection that I've been kind of unboxing slowly over the past couple of weeks and months, right? When you look at all that, this Ashley in armor, I don't think would fit in. So if I were to get one, I think it would be just the standard with her clothing, and I would love that alternate sculpt that has kind of the infected look. I think that would make her a little bit more unique and not just such a standard figure that people are going to look at and say, oh, who is this, right? If you've played the game, you know who it is, but I think it'll set her apart a little bit. So a decent set overall and a decent release, at least I think. Now, with announcements out of the way, we're going to go into new releases. And this is really kind of surprisingly the highlight of the video, because Hot Toys, whatever they're doing, they're just killing it at this point in terms of releases. They did 3 this week, right? And we'll go through all of them, but right, you got Doc Ock, you got Kate Bishop, and you got the Attack of the Clones C-3PO. They're just cranking these out at this point, and they've been doing that pretty much all year, where you've been getting at least 2 releases. So even even on those weeks when they don't have something, right, they're still really cranking these out. And I think time frame is definitely starting to become a little smaller from announcement to release. So definitely not great for your wallets if you're trying to get a lot of these. But it is nice that they've ramped up their production and they're actually putting the figures out the way they've basically said they are. So first release, and this one is probably the most controversial of all of them, is the Doc Ock. Now, I'm sure at this point you've watched a lot of videos, right? People have some very strong opinions. Some people like it. Some people think it's okay, the sculpt, and some people just hate it, right? Now, I don't have the figure in hand, right? Mine is scheduled, right now it's on payment plan, and my last payment got pushed all the way to November, but that happened a couple months ago. So I'm hopeful that with this release in Hong Kong and some of the people starting to get this, that Sideshow will actually get their shipment a little bit earlier, and I'll be able to get them in hand and take a look at them and do a review. Now, looking at the promo shots, I think there are some shots where he looks good. I think there are some shots where the sculpt doesn't look great. And I think, again, that's, at least with some of the reviews I've done, one of the things I've realized is when you're looking at the figure, like, really close up and trying to really focus the camera on it, you're noticing every imperfection and you're noticing every little detail. There are some figures when you're looking at them from like a distance, like this, where I think the likeness, even if it's not 100%, isn't as bad, and it's not something completely noticeable. For me, I'm still really excited with this release. I have the deluxe on order. I had to get those red tentacles with the nanotech. There was just no way I was going to pass on those. So I'm still super excited to get them. I think the figure, with the exception of the sculpt, I think everything else turned out amazing. And I think it continues kind of making this one of the highlight lines that Hot Toys currently has going right now. And once you start getting some of the other villains, I think it's really going to become an amazing line overall. I think the only two figures I've passed on from this line were the Doctor Strange. I just didn't need him. He looked identical to some of the previous versions. And the battle damaged Spider-Man, right? That has the box. I didn't need a battle damaged. But I've got all the other releases, including the black and gold suit. So definitely looking to complete the line, and definitely excited to have this in hand. And I will put a link to a video, Fabs Reviews. He got him in hand already, and he did a great kind of review and quick look, and he did give you some great shots of the sculpt. So I'll put that link in the description too if you want to check that out. It's a great video. And then he also actually has the second figure that I'm excited about, which is the Kate Bishop. So I'll also put the link in the video, in the description for this if you want to check that out. Again, great video. He already got the figure. That one I think is pretty much perfect. I know some people, again, aren't crazy about the sculpt, and I know some people aren't crazy about the character either, right? They're like, where's Hawkeye? Where's this? It's kind of new characters that we're not really interested in. But for me, I'm still, and I do feel at times like I'm the only person, at least in the YouTube world, that still very much loves the MCU. I loved Hawkeye. I thought the show was great. I thought it was entertaining. I loved Kate Bishop. I liked the interactions with Clint. I liked the interactions with Yelena. Only thing that was maybe a little iffy was the way they kind of portrayed Kingpin in the show. But besides that, I thought it was actually a pretty enjoyable show. It was pretty entertaining, and I thought it was pretty good. Maybe that says more about my taste in shows and movies than anything, but right now I'm still pretty much on board the MCU train. I think the only two shows that disappointed me, I think the movies have actually all been entertaining, at least, even Thor Love and Thunder and even Ant-Man. I've got the figures on order as well for those. I really enjoyed them. The only show that I was really disappointed in was Secret Invasion, and I think it's because I read the entire comic book run, and there was so much intrigue in that the show didn't duplicate, right? The show basically became all about Nick Fury, which is fine, and kind of his PTSD. Again, fine, but don't call it Secret Invasion, right? Secret Invasion has a different connotation to it, that you're going to get a certain kind of story, and we didn't get anything like that. It just felt low budget, even though I think everybody knows that was actually a $200 million show. So why it ended up the way it did, I have no idea. That's the only MCU show right now that's disappointed me. So Kate Bishop, I'm extremely happy to have her. I think she's going to go well posed together with Yelena. That pairing was pretty awesome. In fact, I'm actually surprised we didn't get a second Yelena right now from that show, because besides Kate and Clint, she was one of the highlights easily. So maybe we'll get her as an exclusive at some point. Probably doubtful. But Kate Bishop turned out great. I'm really happy. I think the sculpt is phenomenal. I like the look. I like the arrows, the accessories. Everything looks pretty top notch. So again, I've got mine on order from Sideshow, so hopefully I'll get notice that she's shipping soon. Now, the third release was the Attack of the Clones C-3PO. Looks pretty good, right? Again, Star Wars, I'm going a certain direction with that, and I'm just kind of restarting my interest in the line. So C-3PO, not a character or not a figure I'm looking to pick up. I think it looks really good. I think it turned out great. Very much a recreation of what we saw in Attack of the Clones, and I think Hot Toys did a great job. And I think more importantly, right, as we go towards the Return of the Jedi release, which is the more classic look without the rusted armor and the swappable heads, right? That I think is going to be a more popular release, potentially. Not to take away from this one, but this is just, it's a very specific, dirty looking C-3PO. Whereas I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities there later on for, to get that classic original trilogy golden robot look from him that people are really going to be looking for. So a decent release again. Just I think that Return of the Jedi one, or is it Return of the Jedi, but that at least original trilogy one is going to be the more appealing one to people. Now, next two releases are not, let me preface this by they're not actually releases, right? Some samples have gone out apparently to, if you read Kit Chen or Mr. Mom was on the stream where he kind of read it out loud, and he, Kit Chen basically said, Inart only sent out some samples to YouTubers to review. So the Gandalf one went to Big Bretta. He did a great review for that one as well. It looks pretty solid. Am I ready to say Inart is a Hot Toys killer? No, not at all. There are things with Inart that, are questionable. At least I think so. But I think their figures are good. And the figures are speaking for themselves. And I don't think, as a collector, we can really come in and say, no, Inart kind of sucks. I think their releases are actually, the Joker, even with some of the issues people seem to have had with it, turned out great. And it looks like Gandalf is another home run. I think the accessories look great. The figure and the sculpt, primarily with the rooted hair, looks incredible. And I always look at hands with my figures, and usually I'll tell you, looks good, right? The best ones I've seen so far are the Black Widow hands with the nail polish, actually. So when you start looking at all of that, I think there's definitely a big appeal of these are actually looking pretty impressive. The ones that Brett has showcased from Gandalf look phenomenal, right? I don't know that I've seen hands look that good, and that was also true of the Joker release. So I do have to give credit to Inart with the work they're doing there. Now, can they carry that through? I think that's the question. And then it's also production time, right? Because they're going very slowly. I don't know if that's because of their statue background and the Queen Studios background, but right now they're going at a very almost glacial pace. And I know some of us will say, we're used to waiting, right? I'm used to waiting for years for some releases. I mean, the Hulkbuster and the Tron cycle were delayed ridiculously. So patience is part of the game. So I'm not saying that Inart needs to speed through things, but right now they're kind of doing, they're growing their business. So they're doing small figures at a time, and they're doing these batch things, which I'm not crazy about. I'm still a ways off from having my first Inart figure. It's the Harry Potter, so they've got to release the Batman, right, and the Bruce Wayne set. They've got to release Aragorn. They have to officially release Gandalf and Pennywise. So I'm guessing it's probably at least a year, if not more, before I get my first experience with an Inart release. Now, Gandalf looks great. Pennywise, they've only had a couple pictures. I haven't seen any reviews go up, but he does look like he's going to start shipping. I'm not crazy about the... I liked the movie. I actually liked it and It Chapter 2 a lot. Is it enough for me to pick up a Pennywise? Absolutely not. I don't need that in my collection. My kids would be terrified if I had that. So it's a no-go. From the early pictures, I think it looks pretty solid. Is it a Hot Toys killer? I don't have either in hand, so I can't say that one is completely better than the other. But for a figure from just the pictures that they're showcasing, it looks pretty solid. So I think so far, if they do 3 solid releases, I think they're on a good track. And listen, I'm hopeful for what else they could do, and I think they need to start setting themselves apart with their license choices. And I think something like the Lord of the Rings line and the Harry Potter line is going to go a long way in setting them apart from Hot Toys and some of the other companies, and avoid that competition and having people have the same figure released over and over, and that can get a little annoying. All the choices are always good for collectors. So a bunch of good releases there. And then the other one that I'm really excited about, and I've seen some pictures floating around, but I didn't want to poach them from anybody. Present Toys. Present Toys, the 3 figures from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly are out. Kit Chen, I ordered them from him. He posted that they should be shipping soon, so I'm really looking forward to having those in hand. I'm a huge fan of that movie. I watched it with my father growing up, which, as a kid, it's kind of boring, and then as a grown-up, you start really appreciating everything that went into that movie and how good those are. So to have that trio, I'm really excited to get those in hand. Plus, they would be my first Present Toys figures, so it'll give me an opportunity to kind of see how that company measures up. I've had some other third parties, so you start getting an idea, is this a good company? Are you getting a decent product or not? But very excited for those, so hopefully those should be coming my way soon. So a pretty packed week, I think, with a bunch of different releases. Hopefully this video didn't go too long. If you don't like it, if you've watched some of my other ones and you think the format from the previous ones was maybe more efficient and quicker, just comment. I can revert back. I just figured I'd try something a little bit different this time. And then just for next week, I have a Hot Toys US Army Ranger, which is actually a 2004-2005 release, so almost a 20-year-old figure that I'm going to review. And then I finally took advantage of some of the Sideshow deals and got that Rambo, that 3-0 Rambo from First Blood, which is, it looks like a great figure, so I'm looking forward to finally getting that. That should be here next week. So those 2 videos should be going up at some point. But and then we'll see what other surprises Hot Toys has in store for us, or some of the other companies. But that was it. That was a quick recap of this week and a little bit of last week, since I did miss it. Let me know your thoughts, and look, I always appreciate comments, and if you feel inclined and are enjoying some of my videos or some of my thoughts, and you want to give the video a like, really appreciate that. And as always, just thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.